Hello, and welcome back to the Wizards Respite Sanctorum, the show where we dive into all things TTRPG. We got a really fun show lined out. We have a new segment that we're going to drop, and a topic that we're going to deep dive into, like usual. But before we jump into all of that, I am Ash from the Wizards Respite, and as always, I am joined with my good friend Zachariah from Old Man Gaming. Zach, how are you
Hel-
doing, my friend?
hello. Very excited to talk about tabletop role playing games.
All right. Today we're gonna try something a little bit new. We're gonna jump into the news a little bit. Have a couple of quick segments on things that are relatively important to the industry. Whether you're a gamer, a indie publisher, just stuff that is good to keep your eye on. Are you ready to take a look at what's popping off in our corner of the hobbies and the hemisphere?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So these are some of the headlines that popped out when I did a search today. So first, White Wolf is going to be doing something a little bit different. They're kind of like expanding their publishing quite a bit, and they're sort of re-releasing some stuff. They're creating a new expansion, or I think it's like an update to Masquerade. It's going to be Bloodlines 2. Um that apparently they're doing this to try and like basically not exactly um rebrand what they've already produced, but they're going to sort of put a spit shine on what they've already produced, embellish it, expand it, and try to get more content out there to sort of bring eyes back to Masquerade and the other lines that they produced in the past. I think the idea here is that this is a game that has been and games that have been produced in the 90s, and they're trying to bring it to new audiences.
Uh,
Next we have, yeah.
I've played White Wolf. I play these games. There is like I think a third edition or whatever that's out, and it's terribly balanced to the point where everybody in the group tried to play it for like 10 minutes and then just went back to the original, the last edition. They also recently, I think within the last like 2 or 3 years, did these huge like compendium books, like reprints of like the
Yeah.
the original Vampire Masquerade, Meiji Ascension. They're really good books, those ones.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the new books that they're planning on releasing for this new rollout is coming in October, which makes sense. October,
Spooky.
Halloween, spooky season. So that's something to keep an eye out. We'll see if they do better than the last time they tried to do this. Um, but next up, we got Critical Role. It sounds like Dragonheart has Daggerheart. Sorry, has launched. This is supposed to be a narrative-focused TTRPG, so a little bit more on built towards creating storyline than mechanical clunkiness or crunchiness that you've seen in the past. This one was a little bit of an interesting one for me. Critical Role. Matt Mercer has a huge fan base, but he also has a lot of detractors within the community. Personally, my personal take on the whole Matt Mercer effect thing is the dude is a GM, and he is an actor, and he is making a company that does stuff. I mean, like, I think that for the most part, something like this is good for the community. Any expansion of games, more games out there in the TTRPG space is good, especially if it gets the word out to more people. Even if it's a crap game, it's good that it's coming out. Um, because it's just more eyes on a very niche subject.
Was
And if somebody, well,
so Daggerheart is his game? Is their
yeah,
game? That
yeah,
makes sense. I mean, I cannot imagine doing D&D for a podcast. I know everybody does them for podcasts, but like like for like a 1 hour, 2 hour show weekly, I would want to do something as simple mechanically as I could possibly cut it. It makes a lot of sense for them to switch to a narrative system.
yeah. And I'm really interested in seeing how this narrative system goes. It sounds like it's going to be robust, and most narrative systems aren't. They're normally rules light.
Hmm.
That's not a hard rule. There are robust narrative focused systems, but there are not a lot of them.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in seeing that. Definitely something I think we'll be doing like more conversations about in the future. Let's see what else we got in the news. Um, see, Games Workshop is going to be as reported. Actually, this one actually kind of hit some of the big mainstream news. Is they're reporting like massive increase in revenue for this year. They're expecting their finances to go like skyrocketing. Games Workshop are the people that have produced um, the
They're Warhammer.
Space Warhammer. Thank you. I dropped out of my head. Warhammer. A lot of the revenue seems to be coming from Space Marines 2, the video game,
Yep.
uh, which yeah, I was really excited to talk to you about.
You know, on the video game front, Games Workshop is just absolutely making a killing, and their games are really quality products. Space Marine 2 is a huge success when it comes to video games, but they have a lot of like lesser known big successes as well, like Tacticus, which is a mobile miniature game in the Warhammer 40K universe. They also have what else? They had the 4-person survival shooter. I cannot remember the name of it to save my life right now for some reason, like Grimtide or something like that. And then they had the one, a CRPG recently come out, Rogue Trader. Plus, they had so many games, they had a game show onto themselves for future products. We're getting another CRPG from Owlcat for Games Workshop to follow up on Rogue Trader. There's a Space Marine 1 remastered coming. They are absolutely killing it on the video game front, and I think that is contributing a lot to their revenue when it comes to the other things. I mean, they are primarily a war game company, but they own the rights to all of those war games that they then loan out to me. And really that's the smart way to go, because in my opinion, miniature wargaming looks really fun, but it unless you have mortgaged your house to pay for miniatures and then have the time to paint them all, it looks fun. It is not always actually fun. So like, I think this way puts that stuff into people's hands that's much more affordable and much more accessible.
Yeah, 100% agree. The one of the aspects of the war gaming industry, and them particularly, they are very expensive. I've wanted to get into Warhammer for a minute. Warhammer 40K particularly. I have read some of the books that have come out of that series. They're novels. I freaking love them. I love the lore. It's really dark sci-fi, dark fantasy sci-fi. And that lore just drew me in. But holy crap, those minis are expensive.
They're expensive, man. So expensive.
But those video games make their products more accessible.
There's so
And
many of them coming out. Like if you do a search for like Games Workshop video games, you're gonna find like 10 or 12, and a lot of them are very quality, successful products.
that's what it's, I've heard, and that's what these articles seem to be taking. And these articles are coming out of like Bloomberg and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking. So you're talking about legit people, like not just niche, industry news guys, but
Yeah.
guys that follow just companies wide and money articles talking about this. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll see how that ends up going. I think you're the video game guy. I'm way more on the board game and RPG side of things. I'm a little ignorant on the video game stuff, so I rely on you on that heavily. But man, I might just pick up Space Marines 2. It looks cool. It sounds like it's got some cool shit. So
We nominated on our video game award show last year. It was nominated for Game of the Year, if I recall correctly.
Nice.
Phil Billy actually played a lot of it, so you have to talk to him.
Cool. Very cool. And then the final bit of news for today is I try not to. We've tried to dance around politics as much as we can, but unfortunately, one of these topics is just a little on the political side. Apparently, again, coming out of like Bloomberg, talking about the tariffs hitting the tabletop gaming industry. This is coming at a time where like Hasbro is suffering. Hasbro being one of the major like producers of a lot of board games. It's been in our news sphere for a while because they own Wizards of the Coast, but they do a lot of different types of board games. But they're not just the only ones out there that are getting hit by issues with these tariffs. There's basically a big issue with aspects of these games being produced in China and then making it over to US. So we might see a increase in cost on some of our favorite games just because, you know, little tokens or miniatures or even the cardboard that they're printed on is getting jacked up in cost. So we'll see.
Yeah, the tariff thing's pretty impossible to avoid. Even on our video game show, we've had to discuss it a couple of times just because there are so many things that are like going to be affected by it, are affected by it, stuff like that. It sucks, man. What aren't those things eaten up?
Yeah.
It just
pretty much.
And it makes tabletop role playing games is not a cheap hobby. Like it is if you go to the IO and you get like some of the independent stuff, but if you're somebody who likes first party RPG stuff like D&D and stuff like that, it's not a cheap hobby, man. Some of those books cost like $60 to $100, and if that goes up, that's not fun.
Yeah, no, it's not, and it may be a hindrance for the hobby. It also might be a boon for the indie people that primarily do digital content. It might be where a lot of people are starting to move to is digital downloads. So that's something to keep an eye on if you're an indie creator out there.
Welcome to my world, TTRPGs.
Exactly. So that's it for the news segment today.
I liked it.
Zach, any thoughts before we move on?
No more thoughts other than what I said. I think, we can move on to the topic, my friend.
All right. Topic of the day is going to be our NPCs, crafting them, drafting them, DM NPCs, and the like. NPCs are, a fundamental part of the game. That it is what the DM spends a lot of their time doing. When the DM role plays, the DM is role playing an NPC, and it is a broad term. It covers everything from the bad guys to shopkeepers to your character's wife or your PC's character's wife. There's a lot to dive into here, but I figured we'd talk a little bit about crafting NPCs, how to run them, how to manage different types of NPCs, and break down, and then finally talk a little bit about DM NPCs. The bit of a controversy I've run into and stupid arguments online regarding DM NPCs. So, initial thoughts, Zach?
Well, I think that you're a long-term TTRPG person on a long-term TTRPG website. When you are doing a show about NPCs, you've said the phrase NPC 37 times, but never actually said what that stands for. It stands for non-player characters. It is everybody that your character interacts with that is not played by a character. So, the game master. That's what the non-player. Other than that, thoughts. This is an interesting topic. I'm interested to see where we start on this. I have a lot of thoughts on NPCs because NPCs are one of my biggest weaknesses at the end of the day for anything. So where do you want to start on the NPC discussion?
So NPCs is like a broad term. Like you said, it's non-player characters. It's any individual person in the world that is not being played by a player at the table. So there's a lot of different sort of subtypes in there. Why don't we run down some of these primary subtypes real quick?
Sure.
And discuss how we craft them, what we do with them, any philosophies we have behind building them out, when we sit down and write these guys up.
Well, if you don't mind me saying something before we get into that, just on a broad spectrum whole, you don't have to make every NPC stats.
Right.
You don't have to have every villager that they're ever going to talk to. And when your characters decide to talk to somebody you weren't expecting them to talk to, You don't have to be like, oh no, I've got to figure out what their charisma is. Just play it from the hip. You don't always have to like have every character makes up. If you sit there as a game master and try and do the NPCs for an entire city, you're going to be there for a while.
Right, right. And, let's start there. Let's start with, like, the tiny throwaway NPCs,
Sure.
shopkeepers, random dudes on the street. I have one player at one of my tables. Every time she goes into a bar, she looks for a hottie. So I have to figure out if there's an attractive NPC. The flirts. That's my flirt player. I have to figure out if there's an attractive NPC in the bar. Sometimes there is, sometimes they're not.
I think that random rolls help a lot in this case, or highs and lows. I like that kind of stuff. When it comes to the throwaway NPCs, I mean, the first thing to know about a throwaway NPC, in my opinion, as a game master, having done this for 43 years and having it had happened to me probably at least once in every gaming group that I've ever played with, you're going to have one throwaway character that is not a throwaway character. That you want to be a throwaway character, but maybe you do something with the voice. Maybe there's something about them. The player attaches themselves to them, and then all of a sudden, they're with the party at all times. They're the main quest giver. They're just attached to them. Prepare yourself for that. There's going to be someone every time. The most recent pirate game I'm running right now, my in-person game, it's not streamed anywhere, but it's my favorite game that I'm game mastering right now. I had some pirates try and hijack a ship. The main character of those pirates, I was going to have him stick around and kind of do some piratey stuff, gets just killed with a hammer to the face. Like, absolutely murdered by one of the players in the hijacking by a hammer to the face that he didn't see coming. One of the pirates...
Your NPCs are going to die when
they're
you
going to die.
them.
Yes. The one of the NPCs, random henchman number 3, stayed alive and then managed to survive an ensuing shipwreck and then got locked up on the ship with another player. And basically the entire storyline of that player for the next 3 sessions was, can he trust this pirate guy? And are they actually friends, or do they actually hate each other? Like, and this character was, I had to name him on the fly. Like, that's what he was. So, like, you just don't know where your game's going to go and who you're going to end up, like, making a character out of.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, random rolls are sometimes, like, the most fun way to do it. As the GM, I love... The aspect of being a GM is shooting off at the hip, kind of like you said, that I love. That's the thing that I really enjoy about being a game master. And when you get this random ass NPC that the players just want to talk to and they're very interested in, and you start rolling randomly, like, is this guy charismatic? Is this guy, a good guy or a bad guy? And you just randomly roll it. You instantaneously get that improv like moment. And if you like the improv aspect, man, that is a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun.
And I had multiple NPCs all of a sudden, reoccurring NPCs. No idea. I had one guy who was like just a bubbling, guy who would talk to himself. He was insane. And the players, he was supposed to be a throwaway character. It was just some random guy that they like bumped into on the street. I was like, yeah, there's this crazy guy talking. They ended up trying to cure him. They've convinced themselves that he was cursed. They tried to cure him of his madness. They eventually brought him to a cleric. Became a freaking arc. A mini arc.
Yeah, you mentioned this guy on the show before, if I recall correctly. I don't know which episode it was, but you definitely mentioned it before.
Tim the Wizard. Wizard Tim. And I played him like a little goofball for the rest of the campaign that would follow around the characters, because I just randomly rolled for all of his contents. And is he cursed? Dice told me yes. Can they cure the curse? Dice told me yes. And then it became a quest, a mini quest.
Let me ask you a question. How do you do statistics for the random characters?
So,
what's your preferred go-to method? I know mine,
if they become a reoccurring character, then I'll shift to a reoccurring. I'll actually do stats from. If there's just like a random character on the streets, they are going to have whatever the game system would consider to be an average level,
Mm,
kind of. Like if it was like single mod, it would be, essentially what you would typically see as the level 1 character build. If it was
interesting.
D&D, almost everything would be like 10 with maybe 2 scores that are higher than that. Um, 10 being average, you get 0 modifiers for it, with 2 scores being higher, and that's their profession. So if and it makes sense because if they're walking into a situation where they're dealing with a shopkeeper, he's not going to have a lot of strength. He's a shopkeeper, but he's going to have a lot more charisma. So maybe because he has to deal with people every day, and that's just on the fly how I'll throw it together. Whatever makes sense, I'll pick one score that's really good for them because that's their
Nice.
job,
Nice.
and one score that's probably okay for them, maybe just slightly above average, because it's related to their job,
Right.
and then everything else is just average score.
I do the rule of the cover. Tell everybody that, as in judge the book, because that's what it is. So if you're running into a guy and he's a bartender, he's going to have a really good score in bartending stuff, but
Right.
not in somewhere else. If he's a pirate, he might have pickpocket just fine, you know.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I do the rule of the cover. So whatever he is, I try and kind of what I will do, and I encourage every game master to do this because you never know when somebody's going to be real. Is if you're keeping notes, and you should always be keeping notes, but if you're keeping notes, write down the character's name and write down whatever the score was you rolled for them. Like you don't have to like write all the scores down right away. Like, but in the case of Grimes, which is the pirate that I was talking about, Grimes was nothing. He was a nobody. But when
Awesome pirate name, by the way.
right, right, I was proud of that. Grimes, when Grimes was nobody, I would just basically like, okay, this is what I did, and then I marked it down so that you have that continuity. Because again, you want your players to feel like they're in a world, not that you're just telling them a story. You want them to feel like they're in a fully fleshed out world. The only way to do that is with continuity. So, like with Grimes, day one, I was just like, okay, he had fight, so this was his score that I used for this, wrote that down on a sheet of paper. And then when I went later to make Grimes an actual legitimate character, I was like, I need to make sure that these scores are these numbers so that
Right.
there's continuity within the character. There was
Yeah.
another girl. This character was meant to be a little bit more long term, but I hadn't made her yet. Oshana, who was a merchant who was trying to get away from like she was kind of like a tribesman, but she was more obsessed with like kind of more of the piratey western stuff. So she was trying to get out, and she had like studied that stuff and like become kind of a merchant, attached herself to another character, which I love because the guy who's playing that character, I've never done, like, I think I've game mastered him like twice ever, and he's in a romance with this girl now. Like, they are like, he's completely in love, his character's completely in love with her, and like, they're like dual merchants now. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah, so like,
You can go
it,
off like any direction.
any direction. But her was another one that like, okay, right off the bat I wrote down the merchant score that I used. I wrote down her linguistic score and stuff like that, so that later I had that continuity. And write down names. Oh god, write down names. Write down
Yeah.
names, write down names, write down any name you say to a player, write that shit down. Write it
Yeah.
down, because at some point somebody's gonna be like, remember that third dude we talked to for like 10 seconds? What was his name?
Yeah.
I don't know. Billy Bob? Like, I have no idea. Write the names. Just write the names down. Just write them down.
Yeah. I feel like I've done that to you a couple of times on games where you GM actually. Hey, what about that one guy? Um, yeah. So actually, speaking of which, since we're talking about like your random throwaway characters that we moved into more NPC, like reoccurring NPCs. Let's move into
Yeah.
reoccurring NPCs. A character you design and build that is going to interact with the players and is relevant to the storyline. You know, they should be approached multiple times. They should have a name. Your characters are going to remember that name. You know, they're going to remember them as the quest giver, or you know, even the bad guy. I mean, technically, reoccurring NPC will encompass the bad guy, the villains, all the way from the big bad to the henchman that, you know, potentially is questioned. Now that's a reoccurring that's developed on the fly, but a lieutenant. You know, if you have a long form game, you're going to have the big bad, but you're also going to have maybe lieutenants that have to be defeated. They're name dropped throughout the campaign, and you make it to them. They're the head of a level. Now, how do you make that NPC a guy that your players want to kill? They want to take down. He's the bad guy. Also, how do you make those love interests? Where do you go, Zach, when you first start thinking, I have a real character I need to build?
Well, if we're talking about reoccurring NPC, like an NPC that's not always in the game, but is going to be one that's talked to, that sort of thing, I tend to break them down into a couple categories. One is bad guys. Bad guys of note, all right? Like your average henchman, I don't do... Right. Like, if I want the henchman to be a little bit more badass, I make sure that they're at, like, level 3 stats in my head, but I don't really care about that as much. But you either got your friends and your enemies, basically, right? The reoccurring villains, I'll talk about first, because I think they're a little bit more difficult to do. Because A, your players are always going to want to kill them, and they will try to kill them, and they will not think necessarily about, like, being in a human situation. Because the one downside of being in role-playing, right? Being in a role-playing game is you can't die. There's no physical danger to you. So if you're standing in a room and everybody's pointing guns at each other, you're a lot more amped to shoot. It's just facts. Like, right. Your brain is also, as a player, you know statistically what your character can do. We don't know what we can do in real life. Like, we have ideas, but it's a range, right? Like, oh, maybe I can jump that, and then you miss it. Or maybe I can lift that, and then you lift it. Or maybe I can't lift that, and then you do lift it. You don't really know until you do it, and depending on the day, you might not be able to do it. Like, there's no, like, I don't wake up, pull out a sheet, and go, my strength's a 9 today. Like, that's not how it works. Whereas in role-playing games, it works that way for the players. The players can look down at their sheet, and they can go, I have exactly this much combat ability. So I can look around the room and go, I can take all of these motherfuckers. And then the shooting happens. And so they're more ample to go around that. In, like, real life, if you were faced with a villain, you're not going to just jump because there's going to be fear there. Yeah, can I take him? Can I fight these people? In a role-playing game, it's a character. And you know your stats. Like, I'll take that motherfucker every time. So, like... Which is part of the power. Like, I'm not saying take that away from your players. It's part of the power fantasy of TTRPGs. But you get into this weird situation where, as a game master, your villains are the most dangerous part. Whenever your villain is in the game, it is the most dangerous part of the story for you as a game master. That's in my opinion, when you are crafting a narrative for your players, the most dangerous points are where I put the main bad guy. Because I know that if that piece is off the board, everything falls apart. I'll probably save it and we'll still have fun, but the overarching goal of the story will not get to where we need to go if they just decide to kill them. Right. So, like right now, I have a bad guy in that pirate game. I'm sorry I'm bringing up the pirate game, everybody, but I've been on basically... Yeah, I've been working a lot, and it's basically my main game mastered game right now. I'm going to be game mastering more over the summer, but right now it's my main one. The pirate guy. My main bad guy in the first campaign of the Pirates, which we're getting to the finale, is Hammerhead. He's this big, swole pirate lord badass, right? Hammerhead has only ever been in the game with a character who is whose like goal is to not be a coward anymore. So like he has to play him scared, and he is constantly surrounded by other people. So like that's the only points that Hammerhead has been in the game other than talked about. When Hammerhead does enter the game, it is probably going to be the final battle. Like when he meets the other players, it will be the final battle. Because I know my players well enough to know they're going to know that's the bad guy, and they got to shoot him. So, that being said, keep that in mind. I also, personally, as a game master, I think that, and you never want to make things too complicated. But one thing I like to do, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. If you want to jump in or stop me, you stop me.
I got you. Yeah.
But make more than one bad guy. And make sure they're not aligned. I love to have a bad guy over here who's trying to do this and a bad guy over here who's trying to do this. And the players don't want either of those things to happen. And those bad guys don't exactly like either one. But that way you always have a backup and you can always divide the party. And it makes for some crazy ass finales. The pirate game that I'm talking about, we have an island where there's a tree on it that the sap can heal any wound, heal any sickness, all of that stuff. It's just this deserted island in the middle of nowhere. So everybody's trying to get there and get the sap for different reasons. Hammerhead, I don't want to reveal it because some of the people who listen to this might know the plot, but Hammerhead wants to get it for a different reason than eternal life. There is another group that wants to get it because they want to destroy it because they believe that like it's an abomination. There's another group that wants to get it because they want eternal life. And they're all going to converge and everybody's going to shoot each other. That way you at least have that finale, and when one bad guy dies real quick, you have another one to fall back on, another plot to pull off, you know?
That's a really good point. I had not considered that. My way of avoiding like bad guys dying off too early is really like making a lot of lieutenants.
That's not a bad way.
And giving them slightly different motivations. Like maybe the lieutenant is dedicated to the big bad guy. Maybe the lieutenant might betray the big bad guy because they're not really working to get for him for, you know, the intrinsic value of working for that guy, but rather he has his own motivations and he's just aligning his interests with the big bad.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of different reasons that you could have these lieutenants out there.
I also got to say this. As a game master out there, if I can give you a piece of advice, in my personal opinion, don't take shit away from your players. And I, as a player, never hate it more when I know that I have just done enough damage to kill the main bad guy or come up with a plan to kill the main bad guy and somebody just takes it away from me. Like, it just doesn't work. I hate that. I hate it more than anything that I have ever experienced in TTRPGs when I'm like, I hit him with this fireball, I know I've rolled all damage, and they're like, he teleports away at the last second. Don't do that to your players. Remember, this is a power fantasy, and I will specifically make at least 1 or 2 points where I like to call them in my head danger zones. And those danger zones are points where the players could take out the bad guy early. So that, I specifically put it in so that if the player makes a different choice, they have to regret it later. But at the same time, I could lose my big boy, you know? So, like, you have to give the players that opportunity to fuck with things. You'll never see a player light up more than when they feel like they've destroyed your storyline.
Yeah.
They're never going to be happier at the table. They're never going to be more excited when they're like, I did it. That guy's dead. He can't do anything. I won. The bad guys are done. I've stopped that. They're never going to be happier. And you want to make them happy. Oh, they do.
They internalize that victory. It's their characters that did it, but it's them that did it. It is, yeah. And they'll talk about that victory for years. Years. You remember that one time we killed that one guy?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I do.
When you want a player to come back, if you want a player to come back, make them feel like their choices matter, and then you'll make them come back every time.
Yeah. Now, a couple of other notes that I want to throw out there for bad guys, particular, is when I'm writing a bad guy, of course, we are going to have stats because they are going to be the obstacle for them to overcome. So you have to have some kind of mechanic for that in order for it to be a game. But when it comes to writing the character, I try to keep it relatively loose. Bad guys are going to be less loose than other reoccurring NPCs. But what I try to focus on primarily is the bad guy's goal. What is he trying to do? I have 3 categories that I header underneath each bad guy. The goal, the motivation for that goal. Why is he trying to get that thing done? And then any supporting NPCs. That could be lieutenants, family members, whatever might be interesting for that character. The real important one there is the motivation. It doesn't have to be a long, big paragraph, but setting the motivation will tell you 90% of what you need to know about the character's personality. Because if he's trying to achieve the goal for extremely selfish reasons, you can play that character. His personality is selfish. If he's trying to achieve that goal because of some delusion of righteousness, like he's like a prince of hell or whatever, but he thinks he's doing right, you can play him as self-righteous character. It really helps just having that one motivation in there.
I completely agree with that. I think the best villains are villains you can empathize with. The best villains make your players at least question what they're fighting for once throughout the storyline. Like, I love it when a villain like says something to a player and the player's like, maybe I should be with this dude, And
Right.
I love that kind of storytelling.
And it's not that hard to get if you just have that motivation there. And it doesn't have to be like you don't have to write a novel.
Right.
It just has to be like, he wants X because it will save his wife's life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe X is he has to like kill 1 million puppies in order to get this one thing, which is evil. But the reason
Hey man,
why
I'd kill 1 million puppies for my wife. That's for sure.
Exactly.
I've said it here. Hot take. I'll kill 1 million puppies for my wife. And I like puppies. I like them a lot. I'll kill 1 million puppies for my wife.
And that's kind of the thing. Like, if you just have that one line, though. But think about it. If you have that one line, you know how to write this character.
Yeah.
You know how to play this character.
Yep.
He has anguish in his heart about all the evil he has to do, but he's gonna do it.
Yeah, even your serial killer characters, even your characters who are just in it for evil, like, there's something wrong with them. Play it that way. Like, they see people as prey. That's fucked up. Like, people, that's not normal, And
that's a perfect one line.
Yeah, exactly. Can we move to Friends?
Yeah, let's move into Friends. That's another one. I use that same rubric to a certain degree for like Friends, but it's I'm a little bit more looser with like friendly NPCs. They have their motivation, they have their goals in life, which is just broader.
Yeah.
They don't have like the I'm going to conquer the world goal. They have the I want to make a shop, or I want to get from here across to the other side of the continent.
Yeah.
That's real broad. You can do a lot with that.
I want to talk about the Friends because I have a kind of a hot take on it. But before we get to the Friends, I want to talk about the love interests. And I want to say that as a game master who designs love interests, I'm a little bit basic. And I don't know if you like this, but like, so if I'm putting a character out there that I want to become a love interest for a character, or even a flirtatious interest, something along those lines, I will straight up make that character irresistible to the PC that I'm trying to get, especially if it's a good game master. In the case of the pirate thing that I was talking about earlier, she is a natural born merchant. The character that is into her is a merchant from a merchant land, from a merchant world, who a merchant family. Like, so like they literally bond over numbers. So like,
yeah.
Like, and I know that sounds basic out there, everybody. Everybody's out there like, oh, he's so big about making deep characters, and then you just make like a cardboard cutout, like basically a list of everything they want. Yeah, but again, it's also a fantasy, man. It's a fantasy. Yeah. Like, give the players what they want, Like, that's what that's what their characters would want in a partner. Here it is. Here's your perfect partner. You know, and for whatever reason, the idea of that becomes even more cherished to lose, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Like you're creating that link for them to bond to, and that's one of the other things. Though, like you do have to remember, like this is a game, not a book. So you're
Right.
not crafting in the moment like a full-on, deep, meaningful story like you would if you were a writer. When you're crafting an NPC, you're creating a hook for
Mhm.
that deep story to naturally evolve in the game. So when you're creating like the NPC that is a merchant to be, like a love interest for your merchant player character, it's a hook. That's what you're getting out of that moment is you're giving the player. That's the other thing that's important. Give your players something to talk to and
Mhm.
about.
Yeah.
You know, this
Create those
is
role-playing situations.
exactly, and that's what those characteristics like she is a merchant or she is a healer or he is a you know I mean like with my flirt character, he is an extremely attractive tiefling, you know,
Right.
with a lot of charm. And after you've established that rapport, then you can come in with a conflict after something's been coming up, and
Right.
conflicts can come in. I think is another segue to go to for love interests. Conflicts could be in the form of the love interest being kidnapped by the bad guy. It could become in the form of the love interest having a diametrically opposed philosophy. Like the paladin is the PC, your love interest is a rogue. They
Right.
bond over something. Um, they bond over something that they are connected on. You make some connection to them, but then there's some diametric philosophy that is in opposition that can come up little hits here and there. Don't make it a big deal all at once. Just drop it
Well,
here and there.
and with a good player, you always have a storyline. If you have a love interest, always something happens to them. They need you to do something. Like if you have a good player who's very invested in that relationship, you always have a way to
Yes.
like move a story forward. So if you're okay, I'll move to friends now because I
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to say the
We're
hot take
getting
now.
a little long in the tooth, but yeah.
We are a
Let's
little
get to
on the
friends.
tooth. That's what I'm saying. We're getting close to the end here. The hot take is what you described in the beginning of the game, which is the 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 game master character, right?
The DM PC
Yeah.
NPC.
Every
Yeah.
one of my reoccurring friend characters is a DMPC. That's how I treat it. That's the hot take. Like the DMPC thing is like at first it's like you do it because you're new. And then you realize it's bad, so you don't do it anymore. And then you get to a third plane, which it's like every character is my character.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, now I see it. All characters, every character that I try and do that's a reoccurring friend character, is a character that usually comes out of nowhere, which I love. It's just like they're in a situation and I'm like, here are the players in that situation, and then I see who they gravitate to, and then that's who gets stats. And then those characters become my characters. They become party members. They become, fill-ins for situation.
Yeah.
Grimes. There's this other character who I cannot remember the name of, who's like a Tangotan. I'm sorry. They're kind of the tribal peoples. A tribesman who's enslaved on the pirate ship with the coward character, who they're both kind of under the thumb of the big pirate bad guy. They've be bonded, and now he's becoming a character. The woman that's with the merchant, Oshana, she's becoming my character. Like they all become my characters, and
Yeah.
that's important. I think that's important. I think you should roll for them. You should treat them like players, and when they die, they die. That's one of the nice things about game masters. It's like when you realize that you can play while you're game mastering, it's great. because at first you think, I don't want to game master. I want to play. How do I find a workaround for that? But then you're like, oh wait, I'm playing everybody, and that's what I like. It doesn't matter that you know the storyline. You can still play your characters.
Yeah, for sure. And now I'm going to shout out and explain real quick for everybody out there why that is a hot take, why it has a little bit of a controversy thing going to it. And the reason being is you do have DMs that have a tendency sometimes to marry sue their characters, their NPC, their DM NPCs, so that the DM's own character becomes the star of the show. And it starts detracting from what the other players can do. And it's a weird situation because the DM controls the world, and now all of the other players are kind of just there around what the one NPC wants, if that makes sense. And that can be weird. It doesn't have to be. And that's where the trick really comes in, because like, what you had said, all of those characters that you've just listed as your DM NPCs are also very much, they were chosen by the players.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I feel like the line ends up being, is like, what are the players typically doing the most with? Are they typically like just doing whatever the NPC wants, or are they motivated by their own things, and are they allowed to make their own decisions?
Well, it's tricky too, because you need justification. Like that's the key. I had a Dragon Ball Z style game many, 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 many years ago, like a fighting anime game, and there was an entire moment where the main character was an NPC, and the players were so involved in this NPC's storyline of getting powerful enough to hang with them that they were happy about it. They wanted to see where it goes. And it literally turned into a 2-hour session of me describing a fight between myself. And they were completely engrossed. It's where your players are willing to go with you.
Right.
And obviously, they're not going to say the main character forever. You know what I mean? You rotate to somebody else, you get it back into the players, but it's whatever your justification is. Where can you take the storyline, and where should the storyline go? If the story makes sense that it goes to this NPC as the end all be all hero in this moment, and the players are like, that's where it needs to go, then you have to get your players there. You know what I mean? And you can't just be like, oh, now that you've already designed your characters, here's Steve. Steve is a paladin, and all of the storyline is going to center around Steve, and you guys are like NPCs in Steve's story. That's not what you should do. You should do it in a way that, like, here's the story. The story starts centered on... The story is just there. You guys are all players in it, but when you're game mastering somebody, they're the center of their own story. And if you do that, when you get to a point where the NPCs should take center stage, the players are going to want them to, because they're going to be the characters. They're going to be like, yeah, I need this dude to save me, and he's the only one who can do... Yay! Steve's here. Yeah. So, I think you have to... It's a real fine line with justification. That's why I think, at first, if you're a newer game master, just stay away from making... characters that really matter to you, or sticking GM characters in the party. You know what I mean? If you're doing a party-based play. I never do party-based play. I just let everybody make whatever they want, and then whatever the backstories are, that's where they start, whether they're friends or not. Maybe they get together, maybe they don't. I don't give a shit. We're going to move around the table, and we're going to get through the story, So, I don't like to just be like, you're all in a tavern. That's where we start, But if you are doing that, don't just stick a character in there and make the entire story about them. There are trickier ways to do stuff like that,
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you had mentioned about rotating is really helpful and helps you break out of it, any awkwardness that you might end up on having the star that's too big,
Right.
Especially if you are an experienced DM, but your characters are inexperienced. Having a really high level NPC right there to help your players, help your player characters can be very good for teaching players, because maybe they go and do something, and now the player tries to do that same thing later on in the adventure, because they realize, they start to learn those mechanics later on. Like, one thing that I like to do with a lot of my NPCs, I kind of, if they're reoccurring and I'm a little worried about them becoming too like involved or too much of the center and it detracting, I kind of make them a little bit more cartoony. I make their personalities over the top, to a certain degree, not to the point where it detracts from the nature of the game, or the setting. But I'll have my wizard Tim was kind of like, I kind of modeled him off of a Mormon missionary. He was just a really goody two shoes, really friendly and happy. I have a little mouse folk that's following around the players right now, and he is kind of like he's a barbarian kind of insanity. He like just gets angry all the time. He's over the top, because it just helps keep it apart. But they end up just loving that about him, and it's a fun way to keep reoccurring. Like, okay, that's the angry little mouse guy. It's so cute.
Well, and it's okay to care about your NPCs. You have to, because if you don't, then they don't feel real to the players, and that's the whole thing.
Right.
Like Tim and your mousekin, they feel like real characters because you care about them. It's not like you should never care about NPC, and NPC should never do anything. But like, if you don't have characters that feel real to your players, they're going to disassociate with the game world, and that's the last thing you want.
Right,
so you
exactly.
want to create characters you care about. You really do.
Yeah, and characters that your players care about.
Yes.
And you can align their goals and their personalities. Like you had said, your merchant woman is a personality goal, like alignment.
Yep.
Goals could be like, we both want the same thing: take down the big bad for our own reasons. Either way, it helps.
Grimes is my most fun. They're constantly trying to kill each other and then hugging. It's the best.
Yeah.
It is the best.
Love hate. That's a fun one.
He is the character who he's stuck with is a character who was like, I'm not a pirate. I'll never be a pirate. I'm just like a quartermaster, and he has done nothing but pirate work the entire point of the game. The entire time saying he's not a pirate, while this Grimes character is just like, you're the best pirate I've ever met, And he's like, I'm not a pirate. Like, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
That's a great thing to bait and play off of, and that's a great hook for like those moments within the game where like you're just riffing.
Yeah,
personalities are riffing. That's so much fun to do.
Yeah,
and
they've tried to kill each other no less than twice, and Grimes doesn't get it because he's like, why he keep trying to kill me? I'm a pirate. You're a pirate. We're pirates together. And he's like, I'm not a pirate. Like it's great. It's absolutely great.
So I feel like we got it, man. I think we got it.
I think it was a good episode.
Yeah. I think we nailed it. I think there's a lot out there for people to think about, to tinker with when they're building their own games in this hobby. Any last thoughts before we jump into our?
No last thoughts. I mean, I think we covered it. I'm really happy with this. If you guys got any questions, ask us. I mean, we're by no means the end-all be-all of Game Masters, but we love to talk about this stuff with people.
Yeah, if there's anybody out there that has any other NPC tips, I would love to hear it.
That'd be great.
That would be super.
If you wanna put them in the comments below, we'll try and read them on either the next show or the show after. Our recording schedule is crazy, but we'll try and get them out there.
Yeah. All right, Zach, any plugs before we get out of here for today?
Just check out Old Man Gaming. Anything we do TTRPG oriented, you can just watch here on wizardsrespite.com. But we do some video game stuff. We got a video game podcast. I also do some streaming on Wednesdays. I'm back to that. Yay! And then we'll probably have some more streaming and shows going into the summer because we always... because now that I'm out of work, I will have more time for content. So check out everything we have to offer and buy our shirts. I'm wearing one right now. Well, this is actually a Wizard shirt that I designed for him, and I own that shirt. So I almost wore that. We could have been matching. So buy those on wizardsrespite.com. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, and again, like Zach said, all these episodes can be seen at thewizardsrespite.com, along with the t-shirts and the articles that I've been writing. I'm trying to get back into that, doing some more reviews pretty soon. Until next time, everybody out there, keep rolling them dice.